See, I think we're all set up. So, I just want to caveat, if this is the first time you have joined me, know that I am so so real. I just tell you how it is. So Tayson just had a crash. He's my 6-year-old, so usually spend a little time getting myself a little more prepared before I hop on live, but we roll with the punches. All right, so making sure we're all set up. Go ahead and tell me hello if you're on here, where you're from. Welcome, welcome. It's always really cool to see the different places that people are from. I know some of you are, in fact, in different countries, and it's just super cool. All right, so we're going to talk about boundaries, and I want to look at this a different way than probably the mainstream, because that's what I'm all about. I'm all about thinking outside the box, taking a look at stuff like, why isn't that working for me? Why isn't that making sense for me? In fact, I am, I don't want to say frantically because that sounds like it's not with intention, but I am beautifully working on my book, successfully working on my book. I think that I like that word, successfully working on my book. And that's what it's all about. It's like, I run into people all the time and they're like, why isn't this working for me? I follow 1 million people. I've read 100 self-help books. I'm blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, I think someone needs to just lay it out there black and white. Like, why maybe isn't this working for you? Because sometimes it looks really ugly when we look at ourselves and see, what really could be going on. So I figure, what the heck? I might as well be that person that takes the different path, right, than everybody else and looks at it like, okay, hardcore. Like, what part of this do I not really want to address that could potentially be creating my self-sabotage or my self-destruction? I'm just not going to be that person that sells you marshmallows. I just don't find it to be effective, and is really feel like my purpose is, being honest with people. Okay. So a couple of things that I wanted to tell you before we get started. That's just my Healy. Just running, a little Healy on a client for their digestive problems. Couple of things because it's just really cool and I love sharing these moments with you. So I was working on a client earlier and I got this like energy from a block with someone trying to send her a message that's passed on. I could clearly see who the person was that was trying to send her a message. And then sometimes I'm like, okay, what is the message that's trying to come through? Because then I can just relay the message to the person. But I was clearly getting from it was a family member, clearly getting from the family member that they really needed her to do this connection with her, right? Instead of having me be kind of in the middle. And so it was like this super cool process because at the end of her clearing, the end of releasing energy for her around a bunch of stuff, she had a recent like physical trauma. So we were clearing out anything associated with that and then like balancing anything that was going on. Man, my chair is too high and I keep like, I'll probably do this and then I'll go too low and then I'll be like, oh, there we go. I'm moving and my chair's banging on my table and it's like making you guys look like you're in an earthquake. Hi. And then let me just go ahead and choke myself. But I don't have the virus. But I could clearly see from this family member that part of like the message and part of the process was the family member needed to connect with her directly. And so at the end, like part of her affirmation was aligning with the universal laws of energy to be able to receive this communication. And so I was telling her like, just be receptive. about noticing if you're getting a message, because you're getting a message. And I didn't want to tell her too much because I didn't want to like bias her into recognizing something, because then her ego would get in the way and be like, well, the only reason you received this is because Amy told you that you were, right? I wanted it to come through for her. And it was so amazing. You cannot make this stuff up. So literally, I would say within 60 seconds of us finishing our session, she texted me and said, look at this. And she sent me like a little screenshot of an email. And the message was like right there. And she had already figured it out. She's like, I think this is for my grandmother. And I was like, yes, yes, it is. It was so cool because it happened like that quickly for her. So I have to share that with you. And then the other one I was just sharing with my practitioners that are I'm certifying in ELV, which is the energy methodology that I founded. I was telling them, I was like, it's so crazy because something happened to me last Friday, I guess it was, and it's kind of all playing out. Like Saturday, we got the like official, yes, this is going to happen. And then it's just been crazy because as I was sitting there looking at the situation with Dave, I was like, this is like impossible. And then I started, doing what I practice, what I preach. And I was like, no, it's not impossible. And so the old me would have been like praying almost in like, the easiest way for me to kind of look at it is how I used to do things is like sort of praying is almost like a pleading, like, please God, let this happen for us. I don't want to say that I was super like, because I deserve this to happen, but I would say I probably had a little bit of like some entitlement there. Like this should happen for us because, and I was like doing some self-reflection. Seriously, you can never get to a point in your life where you shouldn't self-reflect. Like you can never be so successful. And even by successful, I mean on like a spiritual level, because success on a physical level really is meaningless, honestly. But, you can never stop growing. You can never stop engaging in making yourself get to this like higher space. And so as I was looking at that, I was like, wow, this is so cool, because when this started happening, and I was like, okay, we would basically need nothing short of a miracle to make this work. And as I started talking to people, like I got a no answer from someone, and I was like, okay, that didn't work out so well. And then it sort of popped up into my head, and I got to like, hey, contact this other person that you know. And I was like, all right, I don't know why they would say anything different, because they're seeing the same thing that the other person saw, that they told us, no, this isn't a possibility. But I did it anyway. And so I contacted the other person based off of like an impression that, a little pop into the head where it was like, oh, do this. And I did. And even then during the process, I caught myself and I was like, okay, this is how I do it now. So before I would have been like praying, please let this happen for us, yada, yada, yada. And now it's more like a, hey, I want to be aligned with the most beautiful possibility for us. And if this process is in alignment for our higher divine good, then I'm, aligned, praying, whatever that is for you, to make this happen. But it's with gratitude that I ask for that energy. And I was like, man, that is such a more beautiful process for me than the traditional way that I was taught to pray for something. So I'm going to like recap that a little bit. So I am aligning myself with gratitude that if this is meant to happen for me and it's for my higher divine good, that this will, come to be. And I do that with complete gratitude for everything I have in this moment. And that to me is such a beautiful process compared to how I used to just be like, okay, God, please allow this to happen for us, because I don't know. It was just like very sort of like an eye-opening thing for me of like, wow, this is like a higher level spiritual understanding of how energy flows from your creator. And I mean, those are the beautiful moments for me in this process. Like, in helping other people get to that space is fantastic, because then things just happen for you that are not explainable. And then you just learn that, wow, we don't work in that plane here. We don't work in, like, reality is what you create, and things don't have to make sense anymore. It's really amazing. Okay. So let me tell you about boundaries, and we're going to look at this a little bit differently than how you probably traditionally have looked at boundaries. And I was telling everyone else, I'm going to use notes a lot more than normal, because Tayson had a little spill before I went live. So I had to, be a mom, and being a mom comes first. But we're going to look at this. So boundaries. What do you do when you have to work with someone, be with someone, you can't disconnect them from your life? Like, what do you do? Because there are certain situations that you're placed in where you can't just grab the scissors and cut the cord. I mean, those are the easiest ones, but even then, a lot of you are faced with, like, some pretty significant guilt. So you have a really hard time walking away from that. And so I'm going to tell you 3 things that you can do to help yourself with this. And I thought this was a great subject to hop onto, because what are we all about to do? We're all about to people please and make everybody happy as we hop into the holidays, because we don't want to make, Grandma Franny mad because we didn't come over for Thanksgiving. And so I want to align with you some things that you can do for yourself, but ultimately just know that, it is your choice for the relationships that you choose to be in, and you have to take responsibility and accountability for only yourself. So let me explain that a little further. One of the problems that we have with boundaries is that we get into the space where we really want this to work. So I'm going to use my own relationship that I have with a family member. And I used to allow this person to walk all over me because I wanted to have a relationship with them based on what's in my head for, I think I should have a relationship with my dad, and I think the relationship with my dad should be healthy. And so what happens is we take on the responsibility of trying to make that relationship happen. So I can tell you right now that pick a person. Pick a person, think about that person, and think about how this is a person who you really want to have a relationship with, but you don't. Chances are that that person is going to have to change, or you're not going to have a relationship with them. Maybe you're married to somebody that is really narcissistic, really a gaslighter. They're not really great for you to be around, but in order for them to have a relationship with you that is healthy, what has to happen? They have to change. So your boundary is really soft because you're hoping that by some chance you're going to be able to change them. And so you really don't have any type of a boundary there, because it's being dissolved by you taking on the responsibility of them changing. Kind of think about that for a second. You're not responsible for that person, but yet you're basically taking on that responsibility because you want to be in a relationship with them so desperately that you're kind of absorbing the energy of their inability to change. And how is that damaging you, right? Waiting around for somebody to change the way they are is pretty self-destructive, because you are allowing yourself to take on that responsibility, and you are only responsible for yourself. You are not responsible for how they react. You are not responsible for how they are treating you. But when you want to force that relationship, then that's what starts to happen. So you have to create that healthy boundary that you need to accept that that's their behavior. And we're going to come back to that one in a second. So I'm going to give you an example from my own. Like I desperately wanted for my father to accept me because he never has. Like, let me share with you a story that I just look at it and I'm like, what now? So, I become a pilot in the Air Force and I'm flying a KC-135. So if you want to Google that, you can. It's this big, gigantic aircraft that refuels. I mean, like raise your hand if you are currently a military Air Force pilot, right? Like there's not a lot of them. And then if we narrow it down further, there's really not a lot of females that have done that. And so it's, I mean, I consider it to be an accomplishment, but I recall being at my father's place of employment. He's talking to one of his friends. I just happened to be in the visiting him or something. And so he's introducing me to this person. He's like, okay, this is my oldest daughter, Amy. I mean, honestly, I'm like lucky that he even got my name right, to be quite frank with you. And he's telling this person, so my daughter is a pilot in the Air Force, but she doesn't fly one of those really cool jets. She flies like this really big, heavy airplane that is a refueler. And so she doesn't fly one of those really cool. And he like looks at me, he's like, what are those ones called? Like the F-16s, whatever. The kind that like drop bombs and stuff. So I'm not responsible for my dad's behavior. I'm not responsible for what he just said, yet I allowed myself to absorb that like a toxic dumping ground in my mind, right? Because what is my subconscious hearing? Congratulations on everything you accomplished, but it's not good enough because that is not the cool airplane. Like you didn't try hard. Like that's how that's how the message is coming through to my brain. You didn't try hard enough. You didn't get to the top. You got the, crappy airplane. You didn't blah, 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 blah. But really, I'm not responsible for my dad's behavior. So fast forward. If this happened today in this moment, I wouldn't think twice about what he said. In fact, I might spout off some like really sarcastic comment because that's just me in my ability to be sure of myself. I would have been like, oh, pretty sweet, isn't it? I don't know many people that have done that before. Have you? Right? Like, but instead I was like shamed. I was like, oh, my dad doesn't think that I'm good because I didn't, fly, blah, 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 blah. And I know like it really affected me because I wanted so much to have that with my dad, but I was taking on the toxic responsibility of how my dad was acting. But he's only, he's responsible for his behavior, but I'm taking on responsibility for it because I want him to change. My dog is like underneath my chair and I have a blanket and he's like, digging, like trying to burrow into the blanket. Okay. So it's not my responsibility for how my dad is acting. Thank you. I love my shirt too. But I was taking that on. So there you go. That's the first one. Second one, we're going to talk about. So the first one is boundaries and accepting responsibility for how other people are acting. When you are responsible only for yourself, and this one can be really hard because how many of you take on responsibility for how your kids are acting, how your spouse is acting? You are being really distracting, dude. Taking on responsibility for how are you needing to be seen? Do you need to come up here? Do you need the attention? All right, everyone say hi. Sprout, say hello. Oh, he's like, but Mom, I'm just trying to get warm in the blanket and I love you so much. Okay, everybody loves pets, but not on the kisser. Look, say hi. I don't know. I was wondering if you could see himself. Okay, there you go. All right. Thank you. Second, seeking permission. This is another reason why we really crumble at boundaries is because you want to see the Sally behind me? Are you talking about her? Is that we need permission from other people. And so we put down boundaries. So let's do some examples for this. So seeking for permission makes us boundaryless. So, oh goodness. If I get asked to make a bunch of cookies for something, let's just say that I'm fantastic at baking cookies. Caveat, I am not. But let's say that I'm fantastic at baking cookies and somebody's like, oh, hey, or maybe I make this like super cool cake. I make a Jack and Sally cake. And are you talking about the jar? Are you talking about the cup? I have a Jack cup over there. Is that it? Sorry, everything's backwards. Is it this? Puppies, don't bang your heads on the table. Then I bake this beautiful cake and I post it. It's a Halloween cake. And I bake this beautiful cake and I post it and it's really cool. And it took me like 17 hours to make. And it's like super cool. And I spent like $85 on ingredients and 17 hours of my time. So I don't know, 17 hours of my time. Let's just say there's like a $500 cake. And somebody sees it and they're like, oh my gosh, it is so-and-so's birthday and I need you to make me one of those cakes. And it's a family member. So what starts happening? I start feeling obligated because let's use my grandma. And somebody's like, oh, grandma would love that cake. She loves Nightmare Before Christmas. And maybe I'm projecting of like how I would be if I was a grandma. Anyway, she loves Nightmare Before Christmas and this cake would mean so much. So deep down inside, I'm like, oh, heck no, right? I'm not spending $100 on cake material and doing this for 17 hours again. This is like a one and done. But I can't say no because I feel guilt. And so I don't have that boundary there. And so then I do something like pick up the phone and I call my mom and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all make believe, by the way. I call my mom and I'm like, oh my gosh, my sister says I should make this cake for grandma because she will love it. And this cake took me 17 hours to make and $100 in ingredients. And like, I just don't know. Like I would have to take, 2 days off of work and send my kids to your house to be watched. And I just blah, 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 blah. Right. What am I doing? I'm looking for someone else to justify my boundary. I'm looking for my mom to say, oh yeah, you're right. You shouldn't have to do that. Say no. That's just too much. Ooh, right. Isn't this so cool? Like I so just thrive on like bringing this to you in like a different perspective. Oh, yeah, like where, like the bells are going off. Okay, next one. Um for some reason when we put our needs first, we feel like we need permission. I've done this before with something really simple. Like we'll be driving on a road trip and I'll be like, "Is it okay if we stop and get some water? I'm really thirsty." Like, right? You need permission for such simple stuff like you can't really even put yourself first. um I mean, I do this all the time. Like I catch myself like needing my spouse's permission to do something for myself. Now I would say like I'm probably not really bad at this because I mean, let's just be honest, like I do what I want. But before I would have, like, I've been in a spot where I ask permission to do everything. Like, is it okay if I go to Walmart after work? Is it okay if I, go to bed early or whatever, right? What am I doing? I don't have a boundary because I'm searching for permission from other people to do my thing. Whereas now it's like, hey, I need an hour to type my book today. So, by the way, everybody, I'm spending an hour typing my book from 7 to 8, and I'm shutting the office door, and I'm not taking on responsibility for whatever anyone's doing. If you're hungry, get yourself some food. But before I would have been like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can leave my family alone for an hour because I need permission. And I would have done something like, hey, is it okay, guys, if I go in my office for an hour and type my book? Because I don't want any of you to die in the 60 minutes that I'm in the office because you might starve to death, or somebody might need, to get into the dish, get a fork out of the drawer. And like, what if there's no forks because I haven't done the dishes yet? Where now, like, I've learned boundaries. And if somebody's like, oh, there's no forks, what am I going to do? I'm like, well, you're going to figure it out. Like, you're going to use some problem solving skills, and you're probably going to get in the pantry and find yourself a plastic fork, or you could actually do the dishes and then you'll have a fork to use. So I'm not looking for permission from anyone to do the things that I need to do for myself. But we're really, really taught that that's selfish, and it's not. Let me tell you what is selfish. Okay. Being selfish is we have $10 and I decide to go to McDonald's and I buy $10 worth of food for myself, and then I come home and I eat it in front of all my kids and my husband. Guys, that's being selfish, okay? But telling your family like, hey, I need 30 minutes of downtime and I'm going to go take a bath and I need everybody to, do your thing. You're in charge of yourselves right now. Mom's going to go and do that. Don't anybody knock on the door. I don't want to know if the house is on fire. Just let me be. Okay? Stuff like that. There's a difference between taking care of yourself and being selfish, but we are taught with a past agreement growing up that self-care is selfish, and it's not. Take care of yourself because you can't take care of anybody else unless you're taking care of yourself. Have some boundaries, okay? So not keeping boundaries can be simply because you need that validation. That it's, not okay to be in a relationship with my sister, my mom, my dad, my own child, because you're taught that family's first, family means everything, family, 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 family. This is a generational curse that you're carrying, okay? If your uncle is sexually molesting you and your kids, guys, you don't need validation from someone to be done with that. I don't care if he's genetically attached to you. No, 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 no. Okay, we just have these past agreements in our little noggins that we have to do things the certain way. Crazy, crazy stuff. So when Shane passed away and I had to figure out how to plan a funeral when I was 36 or whatever, I mean, I hadn't prepared for any of that. I didn't expect that my husband would die when I was that young. So I, didn't have it like laid out. And I remember being like, this is stupid because my mom was like, okay, so this is how a traditional funeral happens. And I don't know how much of this is like religious culture because of this place that I live in, where the huge majority of the people that live here all belong to the same culture. I don't know if this is like a church thing or just how people do stuff. But I remember my mom saying, okay, like this is the way that a funeral happens. So, we're all going to get together. It's going to be in a church house. And I mean, same with like a wedding, right? Same type of thing. And then we're going to have a song. We're going to sing a hymn. And then after that, you're going to have a person stand up and talk about, Shane's life. And then you're going to have another person stand up and basically read the obituary. And I was like, what? And my mom's like, yeah, that's what you do. And I was like, why do we need to read the obituary when it's like printed in the newspaper? And I'm like, so people, now keep in mind, like going to funerals was probably not something that I did a lot of. So I don't really know. So I was like, people just stand up there and read the obituary. And my mom's like, yeah, that's what they do. Like, she's very traditional about how this was going to go down. And I'm like, yeah, that seems dumb. And she's like, well, that's what you do. And I was like, yeah, so I'm not going to do what everybody else does. And, that's a boundary. That's a boundary that I have. I don't want to do it how everybody else does. I had a moment the other day where I lost a little bit of my, I would say I do relatively well, composing myself, but I do know that there are moments where I do get a little irritated and I can't get past like the human being part of myself. And so I had to meet with my son's teacher and principal, and I was really, really over the top frustrated, would probably not really describe how I was feeling. And yes, Kylie, exactly. Every time you give up a boundary, you're taking away your self-worth. Absolutely. And so as I'm sitting there having this conversation, I'm getting really irritated because the teacher is consistently saying over and over again, compared to the rest of your class, your son, compared to the rest of the class, your son, compared to the rest of your class, your son. And I try really hard to not use my past as a crutch. I use the things that have happened to me as a way to say, hey, look, you can go through some really crappy things and still come out being happy and having a productive life. That's the reason why I share stuff. I'm not here sharing you my story so that I can get attention. I'm not here sharing my story so I can build this empire of social media. That is not the point. If I have affected one person in a positive way by showing you like, hey, you can go through all this and you can find your joy again, then bam, purpose, passion, dude. But so as I'm getting a little heated and this lady's like, well, this is how all the other kids are. And she's like sliding papers over, showing me data. And she's like, this is the data. And I'm like, yeah. So in the world where I come from, data is for like making sure that like moisture in crackers is aligned. Like to me, the word data with my kid seems really impersonal, right? I don't want my kid to be data. I'm not really interested in how my 6-year-old is comparing to everyone else, unless we're talking like he's not, speaking. And then, yeah, okay, I get it. But the stuff that was being brought to my attention was like really normal behavior. And I actually was at the aquarium yesterday and I was watching a bunch of kids that were older than my son. And I'm like, wait a minute, like kids at this age just don't listen. And so I was like, I'm not really seeing that, sometimes if my kid is zoning out a little bit, that's really him connecting to like his inner self. And anyway, I'm going a little bit too far down that rabbit hole, but as they're like, oh, well, this is how this should be happening, I was like, whoa, 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 you're crossing a boundary. And I said to them, hey, look, I'm not the person that we should be saying this is how you should be, because I've had my spouse pass away. I've lost my daughter all in the like past, 7 years. And if I followed what people should do, I wouldn't be here with you right now. And I was actually really disappointed in the principal's response because she said, we're not here to talk about your past. And I was like, okay. I'm like, well, I'm not bringing that up because I'm looking for your sympathy, because I don't need it at all. I'm making a point to you that you're crossing a line, because I don't do in the box, right? I don't do this happened to you, you fell off your horse, so you should not be walking anymore, right? I don't follow that. No, I'm the type of person that I'm like, nope, I'm going to show you. Like, I'm going to do this regardless of what you say. I don't do limitations because, once again, that's a boundary. That's a boundary that I have. Don't tell me that I can't do something. So don't tell me that, my kid isn't doing it right when he's doing it differently. And I'm not sure where we got lost as far as like education, because back in the day, I thought that, we focused on like how different people learn, and apparently we don't do that anymore. Okay. So that was a little off. Okay. But, it's okay to say no. It's okay to say no. It's okay to be not seeking for validation. If you don't want to have a relationship with your brother, then don't. You don't need anyone to validate that for you. Stop trying to change other people's behaviors so that you can have a relationship. You're just wasting your valuable energy. It's okay to do things differently than everyone else. I have completely decided that as I am progressing with my platform, writing my book, I was thinking to myself as I got involved in like a speaking engagement. Now that like well, I don't want to say now that it's gone, but right? People haven't been doing that. Like they haven't been doing live speaking things because it's all doing over Zoom. But as there's like potential for live seminars are starting to happen again and speakers, I thought to myself, how am I going to dress for that? And then I caught myself being like, oh, well, I better get like a new suit, outfit, whatever, because I'm really not super like the skirt kind, dress kind, whatever. And then as I started thinking about that, I was like, wait a minute, like that is not who I am. Like I am not am I really going to put on a suit to go to a speaking event when I would never wear a suit otherwise? And then I started thinking, why am I wearing a suit? I'm giving up my boundary. Because why? Because I want to fit in. I want to look like I'm a professional speaker. No, I don't. I don't care. I want people to be like, wow, who is this person up on stage wearing freaking Nightmare Before Christmas PJ pants and a shirt that says 100% that witch? Me. I'm me. I'm that person. I'm all about it's time to be real. I'm not, like if you don't want me to speak at your event, then if you don't want me to show up at your event as a professional speaker because I'm dressed this way, then don't invite me to your event because I will be known as the lady who motivates people and shows you this is my authentic self. I'm not putting on a suit coat, wearing some jewelry, whatever, because that's not who I am. I don't do the fake it till you make it, right? I just bring it. Okay. Those are boundaries. Boundaries should be flexible, guys. They're created by you, so don't use them to control others. And it's not a means to change people. All right? That's what I mean by don't use it to control others. So I'm not going to force you to be a good spouse. I'm not going to force you to be my friend because I want you to act differently. It's either there or it's not there. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about was, well, what if I want to have a relationship with my mom and she's toxic? I'm going to tell you what, that is 100% something that you should decide. And I think that you can do it, but you have to go in knowing that, like, for instance, for myself, I still have a relationship with my dad, but I have a limit. So if I catch myself and he's saying things that I catch that are starting to affect me, then I walk away. I just detach myself and I'm like, okay, bye. I don't care if I leave Christmas breakfast in the middle of breakfast. If I have to excuse myself and be like, I'm good, because I can't control how my dad's behavior is. And sometimes he's super chill and he's very happy and there's no issues. And then other times my dad is very critical. He can be very mean. He can be really controlling. And so, it depends, but I'm not going to try to control his behavior and I'm not going to step in and be like, hey, you need to stop acting like that. I'll just leave. So can you do this? Yes, but you still have to have some boundaries in place and you have to be accepting that that is how that person's behavior is, because if you go in thinking you're going to change them, you're not. And then you're giving away your boundary again. So hopefully that makes sense. You have to be knowing that there is toxicity going on. And if you can do that without it affecting you, because some people can, then by all means go for it. I mean, I've worked with people before that are really toxic. It's like kind of like the letting the water roll off your, back or whatever the saying is, but make sure that you're being honest with yourself, because if you're like, well, I'm doing that and I'm just going to go ahead and be around them, you have to be really reflective and say, okay, but is their energy really affecting me in a negative way? Because sometimes we put that boundary down just for the sake of ease. And you might be like, oh no, their energy isn't bothering me at all. But you've definitely had to have worked on yourself to be able to put up some protective mental subconscious energy so that that person doesn't affect you. Otherwise, you're unknowingly, not unwillingly, you're unknowingly can be absorbing it, and you could be thinking that it's not affecting you, but it really is. Okay, there you go. So recap. Let's talk quick. Boundaries. Also clear communication. That's also another one that people really get messed up. If you want to have a boundary, clearly communicating is a boundary. Don't expect people to do things if you're not telling them exactly what your expectations are, because it gets really messy. So 1, accept that you cannot change another person. You're responsible for your behavior. Do not have a relationship with this fantasy of, oh, I'm going to be in a relationship with my mom because she's going to change. She's not. Okay, so accept that you are only responsible for you. You cannot change your mom. Seeking for permission is dropping boundaries. If you're like, oh, I need, my mom to tell me that it's okay that I don't bake that cake, otherwise I feel guilt, that's giving away a boundary. So knowing that it's okay to say no, be yourself. Do not do what you think other people want you to do. Do not people please. That is giving away a boundary. People pleasing. Huge. People hate when you push for clear communication, right? Oh, I was talking to someone today and they were talking about an issue. And I was like, why don't you just tell them that that's what you think? And they were like, oh, yeah, no, that's uncomfortable. And I don't want to create a problem. And it's hard for me because that's how I work. It's like, I'll just tell you. If there's a problem, I'm just going to look at you and say, if you're watching, I love you, but I'm using your name because you just popped up because I think I was actually talking to you, right? I'm just going to look at you and say, Savannah, I'm having a problem. And this is why, is because this is happening and I'm going to do it respectfully, but I'm going to put it right out on the table, black and white. I once leased my horse to a girl and she was doing something with my horse that I was like, this is not okay. And so I was talking with the lady that owned the barn that my horse was at. And I'm like, I have to go tell her like to stop doing this. And the lady was like, well, I don't think you should say it like that direct. And I'm like, why? If I say, as an example, you can't use the purple blanket on my horse, which that isn't the reason, right? But if that was the problem, is that she was using a purple blanket on my horse and I didn't want her to use the purple blanket on my horse, I wouldn't go out and be like, so I'm going to need you to change to a different blanket on that horse. Okay, so let's say that that's what I do. And then the next day I see her again. And so maybe the day before she had a blanket on the horse that was full purple. And the next day I see her using a blanket on my horse that's now purple with green polka dots. Did she do what I asked? Yeah, she stopped using the purple blanket. But if the issue is purple, then I didn't communicate that clearly, right? I should have said, hey, I need you to not use a blanket that has any purple in it on this horse. Be clear, because if I see her the next day with the speckled green dots on the purple blanket, that's my fault. I didn't clearly communicate, and so I didn't put up a boundary for what exactly my expectation was. Okay, guys, in the description, I just am reminding you that I posted a couple things. So there's the link to my Facebook group where I talk a lot about energy work. If that really intrigues you, you can hop on there because I post lots of free resources. There's also a link to my YouTube channel so you don't miss any of my videos. And then last but not least, if you would like to, you can simply message me anywhere on Facebook. You can send me an email to amy@blockedemotions.com if you want to hop on my email list so that you make sure you don't miss any announcements that I do. I'm not one of those people that like emails you 17 times a day to be like, oh, but wait, there's more. Join my program. I mean, I'm here. I'm not a pusher. So if you want to join me and, become one of my practitioners, then, by all means, like my seat at my table is welcome for you, but it's definitely not, it's not a shoved in your face process. Okay. There you go, guys. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your Tuesday. For those of you that are in my soul-centered practitioner group, I will see you on Thursday night, I believe at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We are doing a beautiful group session with alignment around the new moon and working on, I can't remember specifically, but something delicious. But you can come to that with intention for whatever is really ailing you. So if you're having an issue with a person, you're having an issue with something going on in your life, you can also come with that intention and focus, and we will clear things around that and make beautiful things happen for you. Okay, guys, love you. Have a great night.